Good afternoon. Welcome to the Public Works Committee for the City of Rapid City for Tuesday, July 29th, 2014. We'd like to begin the meeting with the roll call and determination of quorum.
Estes. Doyle. Roberts. Scott. Wright. We have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda unless anyone has any additions or modifications to the agenda. So moved. I've got a motion by Estes to adopt the agenda, a second by Doyle. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now's the time for general public comment. This is a time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to this committee on any issue, not limited to the items on the agenda. Action will not be taken on any item discussed at this time unless it is placed by the agenda by unanimous vote of the aldermen present. Currently, I have no general public comments. Am I missing anyone? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the consent items. Consent items consist of items 1 through 16. On the consent items, we'll now hear from public comment concerning any of the items placed on the agenda, consent items 1 through 16. I currently do not have any consent items, agenda request forms. Am I missing anyone for items 1 through 16? Okay, we'll move on to taking some removals or comments on items 1 through 16 from the consent calendar, or I'll take a motion to approve the consent calendar as is. Chair recognizes Alderwoman Doyle.
I'd like to remove. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to remove number 6.
Any other removals from the consent item? The chair would like to remove item number 15. Any other items? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent items 1 through 16 with removing 6 and 15.
Second.
Got a motion by Estes to approve the consent items 1 through 16 except item number 6 and item number 15, second by Doyle. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent items 1 through 16 except item number 6 and 15 have been approved. Item number 6. The Enchanted Pines Drive Sanitary Sewer Extension, and the estimated cost is $120,000, and the chair will recognize Alderwoman Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion to approve and then maintain the floor.
Got a motion by Doyle, second by Roberts, and Alderwoman Doyle, you have the floor.
Thank you. I do have a question for Mr. Wolterstorff, if I may.
Yes, you may.
Or Mr. Tech, whomever is most appropriate. The question is this. I've already been asked, knowing that this is on the agenda, when it's going to be available for people to connect. Do we have a timeline on that?
We have not advertised the bids, obviously, for this project. Our anticipation was we'll have an advertisement. It'll be a winter construction for the sanitary sewer, and then we would anticipate that the upstream properties that are currently on dry sewer would start connecting in the springtime when the ground is thawed.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 15. Item number 15 is to approve the Rapid City Area Origin Destination Study Draft Report. And if there's no other comments, the chair pulled this. I pulled this only because I found it very, very interesting that new technology is being used in order to develop the traffic patterns within our area. The data being collected is going to be utilizing mobile devices, so any type of cell phone or notebook or anything else that has a GPS location. All the information is anonymous. They're not tracking it by number, but they are actually going to be tracking from cell tower to try to develop those patterns of our busy season in the summertime with their tourists versus the wintertime when it's mostly more of just us locals. And that latest technology is what's going to be used in this report. So I just found that interesting, and Some people may think Big Brother's even getting more intrusive, but I just wanted it made known that it is anonymous information, but they're just going to be tracking dots. So, got a motion to approve by Doyle? Second by Roberts. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We're moving on to the non-consent items. This is a time for public comment on the non-consent items 17 through 19. Currently, I do have a few speaker request forms. One for item number 17, Dave Lamb and Andrea Anderson? Andrea?
Dave is turning in a form and he's going to talk. It's just us, so we have one person.
All right, sir, if you'd step up to the podium and if you'd state your name and your address and go ahead and let us know what your concerns or opinions are on item number 17.
You bet. Thanks for having me up here. My name is David Lamb. My address is 4555 Reservoir Road. We live in Rapid Valley, and we keep track of a fairly valuable open space down there that relates to the topic we're on, which is the new drainage assessments. And we received a fairly high assessment for that compared with, say, people in Rapid City who may have a space that does have some drainage from roofs and driveways but may have a $4 one. Ours is high enough that it's in the general range that it would tend to eventually eat up the value of the property if you were to maintain it as it is. And the reason I think that we need to think about a modification to the otherwise good idea of planning our drainage here in Rapid City is that the property that we're involved with is agriculturally zoned. It is listed as a lot, but in really they aren't lots. They're just part of what are actually drainage absorption areas that include other areas too. There's just arbitrary lines. And the reason those arbitrary lines of the city limits are there is because they were placed there at different times to create areas of Rapid City, not for our purposes, but for Rapid City's purposes. And they come across there for reasons that have nothing to do with anything. In fact, frequently they're for projects that never finally went through, but the city boundary is still located there. And the problem with that is that you're planning a drainage plan that, in the case of the agricultural properties located in this area, they actually are already areas that are receiving and mitigating drainage. It's being absorbed at a very high rate. We've brought in a lot of support information about the water use and so on, but since my great-grandfather got here and James Woods that founded that ranch and so on a long time ago, they've been using this best soil in western South Dakota to create something that uses the water we have, more water brought in, and effectively is a resource that's helping with drainage rather than causing drainage. There's no roofs, no roads, no surfaces that cause drainage to any other areas. Just a quick example, when we had our heavy little cloudburst the other day that did a lot of damage along Interstate 90 and so on, the road approaches on the north side of Highway 44 going east had water running over the top of them. There was no water really doing that at all on the south side of 44 because the properties over there are properties that absorb water and don't cause drainage. So we think that it would be extremely important to keep that property that is helping with drainage mitigation in place and not tax it rather than to have a fee for that type of property. If that is the case, then in essence you're charging people a fairly strong burden in order to have them take care of some of the drainage for Rapid City. So that's what we're hoping to present. Is there anything else I can say about that that would be useful, supporting the amounts of water that are taken in and so on?
Thank you, Mr. Lamb. This item, when it comes up for the council to consider, would you be available for questions at that time?
We would certainly love to be available, sure.
Thank you. It should be just a couple minutes here. I have a couple more speaker request forms.
Okay.
The other speaker request forms I have are for item number 18. On our speaker request forms, just a reminder, we do have a light system up here. You'll have 3 minutes to talk on your item, and the green light means go. The yellow light means you got about 30 seconds left, and then red if you could wrap up your comments, and then we'll move on. And then you will have availability to be addressed and answer any other questions when we actually consider the item up for discussion up on the dais here. First speaker request form I have is for Mr. James Huff. Sir, if you could approach the podium, state your name and address, and let us know your concerns or opinion on item number 18.
My name is James Huff, address 4242 Calle Baja, it's Rapid City. I prepared a written document, and I hope all of you have received this. Have you? Have you had a chance to read it? Okay. I hope you have a chance to read it before we go into the discussion. It's a page and a half. Basically what it amounts to, we're appealing a turn down by the engineering department to install a 500-gallon waste tank system as a backup. And we had multiple objections. The objections are listed here, and I will cover those later. What we're recommending is basically installing backup electrical systems to drive the grinder lift station should there be an electrical outage. So this has been reviewed, and we've had input from consultant engineers, and I will go at this more in depth, but I hope that the committee will review what I've provided here for the information of the committee. I won't take those 3 minutes to read this, but I will read sections later. Okay?
Sir, if there's any specific sections, because unless a committee member up here has a question of you, this will be your only opportunity to address us
Okay.
on your terms. So
Well,
if there's any specific section you'd like to point out?
Yes. I'd like to point out that the sanitary sewer water system, according to what the city is recommending, would store sewer water in the event of a power outage. The 500-gallon tank would fill if the system alarm would go off, and it would continue to operate, creating a scenario where it could flow into Canyon Lake and result in contamination. The manufacturer of the hermetically sealed grinder lift station indicated that it is not typical to connect an overflow hermetic system to an overflow system. There's no other system like it in Rapid City, and they know of no system set up to do this. What we're recommending is that each home connect and install an auxiliary electrical power connection for each grinder lift station at that residence. In the event of a general power failure, a portable generator or an installed generator would automatically turn on to supply the grinder lift station with electrical power to remove the sewer water from the station. The integration of the external power unit for a grinder lift station would ensure that the hermetically sealed system is not compromised. The system, as designated by the manufacturer, is hermetically sealed, pressurized to assure no overflow. Once the high water alarm goes off, the additional flow of water into the station could only back up into the house. The alarm system, using the latest technology, this is battery technology, for the lift station, would notify the homeowners via email, text, or visual signal, even if the line power was out. The backup system will signal the homeowner to no longer use water. However, if an additional tank is connected to the system, the homeowner would have a false sense of additional capacity within the system. The system would have the visual monitor once the alarm goes off. Therefore, we're requesting that the residents of Calle Baja request be approved for installation of auxiliary power units to to each one of the grinder lift stations.
Thank you, Mr. Huff. If there's any questions from the committee members, we should be addressing this topic here in just a few minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The second speaker request form I have is Mr. Tom Stanton. Sir, if you'd approach the podium, state your name and address, and let us know what your opinions and concerns are for item number 18.
I'm Tom Stanton, 4132 Calle Baja, and I'm a resident there. I'm going to tell you, and it probably doesn't come as a shock, but bigger isn't always better. We get it in advertising quite a bit. In this particular case, what Mr. Huff was saying, that 500-gallon overflow tank actually ruins this system that the manufacturer designed to be hermetically sealed and cannot overflow. The safeties are built in. It works the way it was manufactured. And what we've done is the city engineer and his staff has decided, because of a regulation which was plagiarized for the most part from Colorado towns, never tested against this system, because it says you need a 500-gallon tank, they've tried to incorporate that into a system that would be degraded by such a tank. It's not safer the way it's recommended now. The way the manufacturer put it together is the safest way to keep Canyon Lake as clean as it is. And I haven't even changed colors yet, but that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And the third speaker request and final speaker request I have on non-consent items is also for item number 18, and it is Mr. Tom Hilland. And sir, if you'd state your name and address and go ahead and let us know what your concerns or opinions are concerning 18.
Tom Hilland, 4200 Calle Baja. We're a resident there. I'm really not going to add anything else. I think between Jim and Tom and the paper that Jim turned in, you can see that what the manufacturer recommends. And obviously, we'd like to stick with that and do it that way. So I'll be available for questions, but that's all I've got.
Thank you, sir. Seeing no further speaker request forms on non-consent items, items number 17 through 19, have I missed anyone? If not, public comment is now closed, and we will be moving on to the non-consent items. The first item on the non-consent calendar is item number 17, which is a request for reduction in stormwater drainage utility fees for agricultural property. Andrea Anderson and Dale Schultke, if I'm saying that correctly, and I'll entertain some discussion or a motion from the committee members. Chair recognizes Alderwoman Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would actually like to hear from these people so that you can hear the conversation that we've had, if you're willing to entertain that.
Any objections from the committee members? Seeing none, you have the floor, Alderwoman Doyle.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson? Mr. Schulke? Are you? Okay. I was going to guess, but since we haven't officially met, I want to presume. Okay, so just in a general nutshell, they received their letters just like the rest of us within city limits did, and the discrepancy between their actual tax bill and the addition of this new stormwater utility drainage fee was exorbitant. And we're looking, the discussion we had centered upon the land categorizations that we approved in that resolution that companioned this storm drainage utility. We have certain land uses. Their agricultural land is being categorized as undeveloped lot, vacant or undeveloped lot. And there's obviously a wide variety of things that can fall within that undeveloped lot. In this case, I guess the question is their lot undeveloped when it's being used for a specific purpose? and that purpose is growing alfalfa and raising cattle. So if you would, I know we talked about some of the uptake ratios and different things like that, just to allow this committee to get up to speed on the conversation that we had. I know you brought some supporting information today.
Yeah, there's a very, very complicated stuff available from USDA on all different crops, and it goes on and on. I did have one piece of material that had a really nice graph in it, and it was created by Respect. And actually, they studied the very piece of property that we're talking about at that time. And it's easy to understand. I'll give it to you. It has a line for the rainfall, and it has a line for what water use we needed on top of the rainfall. Oh, okay, he has magic. And on the internet, it goes on and on. I'm not sure how to twist it. There. But Respect came out and studied this area, and it would include Schulke's. It's the valley, and they're just right next to each other. And this is 1970 up to 2004, and the little green line is the rainfall. And then the purple line is the water we had to add. So we are water absorbers. We stored and developed sluice systems. We've got drainage just directing it wherever we can get it to. We need a lot of water. And it's because of the business we're in. We're not a vacant lot who's like, what vacant lot person goes out there and tries to claim every drop they can get their mitts on? And we pay for water too, you know. So we've created all systems to conserve, hold, utilize water because it produces more crops for my cattle to eat, to sell, and alfalfa is a very thirsty crop. It's a high-use water. Now, a good part of alfalfa is you replant on a 7 to 10-year rotation. We use no-till drill. We do not shed water even, much when we're trying to replant. So we're not plowing down to dirt. Our type of activity, which is a West River activity, is such that we're always conserving, never trying to break our soil, don't like dust, want all the water that we can get. And we will, in the spring, we drag our fields, which basically we're scratching. We want to just slightly break the crust because we want everything we can get. And I brought some pictures of the sluice systems, and they're on our USD maps. We're also insured. Why would a vacant lot insure the plants on their lot? I'm fully insured. To participate in the federal programs, I have to carry private insurance on all this area in question to ensure the crop. It's of high value. So to us, I mean, it's not, big money to you, but to us it is. So it's very, very specific. This is not, to me, a very painted with a big old broad brush. This is very specific that, and because we have their maps, which, well, it doesn't like it, does it? Well, it's not, maybe this one it would like better. That one might be saturated. They do aerial maps of us, and I have to register what is on every piece of land that we have. I have to name the type of plants. I have to register that type of plants. I have to assure it according to the type of plant. And then I want lots of plants because that's how it works, So I can leave these with you, but basically what we have is a complex system of waterways where we can hold our water back, we can release it slowly, and I bought some photos I took the other day of the systems. It's also, there's the little giant ditches run through there, and our private ditches run through there that come off of some of the main irrigation ditches. And if you could take these photos up. some pictures so you could kind of visualize this. This is, and I don't mean to, I'm sure you've seen fields before, but until I met Dave, I just drove by and they were pretty and green, and that was the end of it. So I did not realize the kind of effort it takes and everything you have to do to get the feed for our cattle. I mean, we're cow-calf, so we need to make a lot of hay.
What your drainage fee is going to do, it's going to drive the agriculture right out of it. You've raised the taxes threefold, I believe, from what our taxes were last year. This is 3 times higher than our taxes were. I think my taxes are around $2,000. This is $7,700 in additional tax on the same amount of ground.
And what was yours, Ms. Anderson? Altogether, I know you have a bunch of different parcels.
Yeah, ours is about triple. This was $6,200, and I've got our tax bills, I could tell you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's right at 7,000 for
Yeah.
you.
So it tripled what we pay in our real estate tax.
Close to 14,000 altogether.
Yeah.
Okay. I saw back on, if you could throw that
Oh, and then I got
water versus or the rainfall versus irrigation.
Yeah. And then if you would like, you know, there's like books 2-3 inches thick that, you know, NRCS and USDA and very complicated formulas. So I thought this is simple to see. You don't have to read for 45 minutes or 2 days.
It is, and I see that on a few of these years over the course of this graph, there was more rainfall than irrigation. So in those cases, was your existing stormwater detention system enough to retain all of that?
Yes.
And you have a mechanism to control at the outlet, you do?
Yeah, what we did is we've inserted concrete culverts in between each of the holding areas. And if you look at the pictures, you can see the amount of wildlife refuge, cattails, and different things, and the plants themselves are built to not let things just race through and cause trouble. So, no, we haven't experienced any overwhelming situations at all.
Okay. Well, I want to say I, for one, certainly appreciate you bringing this forward. I know that when the committee and Public Works were meeting to, and it was comprised of a wide variety of citizens from the public, I don't recall anyone having actually operating agricultural land on that committee, but I was only the alternate, so I wasn't there for each and every discussion. But I know that one of the things that was stressed is that we wanted to make this fair. And I don't know that we're going to have a resolution for you today. But what I do know is that I, for one, am willing to take another look at this because I vehemently disagree that an undeveloped or vacant lot is the same as the enterprise that you're running. You know, I used to study this stuff and operate in the field, worked in a lot of wetlands in my time. And so we just need to make it fair. And I don't know what that's going to mean, but I know that this committee will probably get that conversation started, and we're going to see if we can take it up to council. So with that said, I guess since I've already spoken, I'll have to turn it over to a colleague to maybe just acknowledge this discussion. But is there anything else? I see a new slide. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, that's due north of us.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's important for everybody to chip in. That's not the issue, but I talked to quite a few people, and it's about $4 for each one of these individuals. They got an increase of $4, so that's why we were thinking that you know we need to try to maybe a different category or formula or something.
Right, and then one question I have, Terry, if I recall, the resolution, or there was a rate fee adopted by resolution as a companion to the actual stormwater utility ordinance, is that correct?
The actual unit charge was adopted by resolution.
Okay. I'll yield for now, thank you.
Chair recognizes Alderman Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
This is something I was concerned about from the beginning on this. And if we did this to the citizens of Rapid City and we increased their tax bills by a third, we'd have 70,000 people in, 300%. Yeah, but their total tax bill, they said, went up a third.
No, 300%.
No?
300%, sir.
It went up 300%?
Yes,
300%.
300%.
I misunderstood you.
Yeah.
I still gotta
Okay.
pay the 2,000, and my new bill, this is an additional over $7,000 on top of that.
Wow. Yeah, we should have done that to the residents of Rapid City. We could have created
Yeah, this
$500
room-
million in this
Yeah,
tax.
room would be full right now.
I will say that I don't believe it's fair. I mean, there is something that needs to be done about this, and I do want to apologize to you for this happening to you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair recognizes Alderman Estes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I probably should abstain from as much conversation as I can because I own a parcel that's ag that's that was on that master list. You know, and some of our residents in Rapid, you know, and I think, you know, I supported the stormwater drainage utility, and I think I said that it may not be perfect, but it's what we have right now, and I support the need for it. We've when we talk about taxing some of our people in Rapid by 3 times, they have been. I mean, we've had one of the reasons and compelling reasons to do this initially was we have friends and neighbors beside us that got backed into the floodway, you know, and to add insult to injury, they have to pay this tax and flood insurance. So, you know, we do have people, and I can see by the pictures and everything, this is a little bit different deal. And in my parcel, I had it sold, as a matter of fact, and about 3 days before the closing, we had a gully washer, and the water came running through my land and over the road, and the guy backed out. Now, there's a lot of development upstream from my land. So I think there's, you know, there's difference, you know, so out where we are, we need drainage structures to handle the water. So I think that, you know, it's case by case. And I wanted to is it too late, ma'am, since everybody spoke, that I can make a motion?
No, I still have committee members in the queue, so.
Okay, sorry about that. I did want to make a motion, but anyway, on the lighter side, Andrea, did you take these pictures?
Yeah,
And this land's in the city limits?
yeah.
Where in the world was code enforcement? We have stuff over 8 inches high out here.
I know.
Huh? We need to shut you down, lady.
I know. I read it, and it is. Yeah, I read it, and I am always wrong.
And we have evidence. We got you
I know.
right where we want you. So,
And
anyway,
we had to cut that down immediately, by the way. Yes.
yeah.
Well, we cut it. We cut it once. That's the second cut coming.
I used to buy alfalfa from you when my daughter showed horses. So, anyway, I'm not so smart to think that I can't learn a little bit more about this and be willing to look. But at most, I would be willing to vote for a motion to acknowledge this at this point in time, so that we can continue to research. Maybe, you know, there are some other extenuating circumstances in other cases that have been brought to my attention, but you know, I want to move forward very cautiously on how we do this. So anyway, I will yield, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Alderman Estes, you made a comment that you were contemplating abstaining from this discussion because you own a parcel that is classified agricultural, but this item is not addressing that at this point. So I'm just for clarification, you are not abstaining at this point, correct?
If the vote is to acknowledge, I will not abstain.
Okay, we'll hold on till we get a motion. So currently, just to let everyone know, I do not have a motion on the floor, and the chair would like to go to our Public Works Director. And you're in the queue, Terry, correct?
Thank you.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
If guys, if other council members had questions, I could certainly wait till they're done with their questions so I could address them all.
All right, we'll hold you on the back burner, and Chair recognizes Alderwoman Doyle. And a reminder, I currently do not have a motion on the floor.
I'm on it. I'd like to make a motion to acknowledge the current discussion as well as place on a future Public Works agenda for future discussion the storm drainage rate structure.
I've got a motion by Doyle to acknowledge and to place an item at the next Public Works meeting, the discussion on the rate structure for the drainage utility fee, and a second by Roberts. Alderwoman Doyle, you still have the floor.
Thank you. And I'm basing this on looking at the existing ordinance. We have church, we have commercial and retail in one category. We have 6 different categories for residential. We have industrial, school, undeveloped or vacant, and other, which doesn't actually have a coefficient here. But it's interesting. I mean, I think there may be an opportunity here to more finely tune and finely hone this fee. Neither of the people that I spoke with, Dale or Andrea, said we don't want to pay this. And I think as a council person, we just want to make sure that it's fair. They're not trying to get out of it. They just want to make sure that it's equitable. And so I think that does warrant further discussion. Thank you.
Looking for further discussion from committee members. Seeing none, the chair would like to recognize Public Works Director Terry Wolsterstorff.
Thank you. Trying to think the best place to start here. Let me start with a little history on the actual ordinance and the framework and the rate structure itself. We certainly did not reinvent the wheel on this one. Most all the communities in the state of South Dakota use the same setup. In fact, communities across the country use the same setup. My recollection is that the engineering behind it, the rate structure behind it, was actually developed by the Soil Conservation Office. Kind of started in the state of Iowa area. So that was my recollection when we were doing some of the history background of how were the runoff factors calculated. So it does take into effect agricultural property. If you actually were to look at that rate structure, if we were to use the other, basically it puts you into a different table, and you actually look at the amount of impervious area. So take a piece of ag property, there's 0 impervious area on it. The runoff factor for 0 impervious area is 1, which is the lowest number that you can be assigned. It's also the same number assigned to vacant and undeveloped land. The theory there is that we're not talking about small rain events, we're talking about peak rain events, 10, 20, 50, 100-year storm events where there will be runoff, and that's runoff that has to be maintained through the stormwater drainage system. So those properties do still produce runoff. Keep in mind that the way that this is set up, the highest burden is really borne by the commercial and industrial properties in Rapid City. Let me give you some examples. If you were to take a 1-acre parcel of land, if it's a vacant or agricultural property, that 1-acre parcel would pay $17.42. A commercial property on 1 acre pays $326. So now if you were to expand that out, let's look at a 40-acre parcel of land. A 40-acre parcel of agricultural property under this rate structure pays just under $700 per year. An industrial property that's 40 acres, and we have several of them in Rapid City, they're paying nearly $12,000. So this is heavily weighted towards those properties which have a substantial amount of impervious area. The other thing to keep in mind is I have some concerns over starting to exempt properties, because once we open that box, I'm not quite sure where you close it. The next group in here will be the nonprofits. The group after that will be the school districts, state, federal governments. And the other thing to keep in mind is for every dollar you exempt from another property, in theory, you should spread that value or that revenue source against the other properties that are generating the revenue. So if you're not going to charge $122,000 to the agricultural properties on this list, in theory, you should revisit the financial unit charge, and you should raise that so you could still generate the revenue that you need. The other concern I have is that it is difficult to put together a rate structure which will seem fair in the eyes of every ratepayer. And if you look at this list of ag properties that I gave you, which we generated off the county list, there's a wide range of what you would consider ag properties. I'll point out one of them on there is if you drive up on East Mall Drive between Tisch Boulevard and La Crosse Street, those commercial properties on either side of Mall Drive, those are ag properties. They pay agricultural tax values. So to just say we're going to exempt ag properties, I don't know that would be fair. We could certainly look into this a little more, but I'm not sure how you develop a rate structure that is fair for all, and yet how you can hand pick out certain properties that you say, like, this property doesn't produce any stormwater runoff. Well, because in all honesty, every property will produce stormwater runoff during those peak heavy storm events.
Thank you, Terry. You're going to stand for questions. I do have a couple more lights from committee members at this time. Chair recognizes Alderwoman Doyle.
Thank you once again, Madam Chair. I don't think anybody is asking for an exemption. I have not heard anybody come forward and ask for that, so we need to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. But I have some concerns. And, you know, we did study this, but I'm starting to wonder if we studied it enough, because when you look at the fact that it was projected to generate $4 million, and which was still barely tackling our $100 million priority list, and now it's coming in at $2.6 million, there's some questions there. Did we look at it? Did we look at it right? Just for Mr. Schulke's property, if we took his fee for 5 years, $38,500, I mean, what kind of improvements could we do on your specific land to not be contributing to that? I mean, $38,000, we could build a heck of a stormwater detention facility for you. So, you know, maybe the solution for these specific properties that are growing is to take a look at the fees for a certain number of years, and maybe we do come up with, okay, if the property owner is putting these improvements in and they can show that they're retaining this and not contributing to the problem, then we can take that into account for a site-specific analysis. I mean, there are some options. I don't want to sit here and say, well, I just don't know what we can do, because I think we can do something, and I think we need to get together, and I would hope that the minds behind this that got this ball rolling could solve some of these issues. So I think there's plenty more discussion to be had. I think that's all on my list right now. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Alderman Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And question for Terry real quick. Terry, when you're talking about these commercial properties that are being assessed at a higher rate, what are the tax bills coming off of these commercial properties? My question, let me further that a little bit more. Are any of these commercial properties being charged 50% more on their tax bill?
I haven't generated the numbers. It's obviously going to depend on the value of the structures on the property.
Well, I can guarantee you none of them are getting charged 50% more on their tax bill, or we would be hearing about them right now. And I think, really, you've had them that high? I haven't heard any that high. I've heard some relatively high, but none that high. Okay, let's say 100%. Let's say 200%. I think there's one way that we could take care of this, and this is going to take a lot more discussion. But if we would limit the maximum of this rate fee to what they're being assessed on their taxes at a percentage, say the percentage, your tax bill could never go up more than 10% or 5% or whatever because of this fee. I think that, and like I said, we need to talk more about this, and we'll have more discussions about this in the future, I'm sure. But there has to be some way to limit the amount on this tax. Anyway, thank you, Ms. Chair.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Alderwoman Doyle.
I did have one more thing for Mr. Wolterstorff, if I may. Whatever happened, Mr. Wolterstorff, about the exemption at the level of the state you were trying to chase down? I know you said it just didn't pan out, but what Why did it start? Is it there for certain reasons and not for others? Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, there's a statute. Actually, Sioux Falls, under their drainage ordinance, they have historically exempted ag properties as defined by state statute. And I did have Wade review that. I don't know that he's completed his review on that yet, but I think his early indication was that particular statute did not apply to our drainage ordinance, because we actually used a different, probably a newer statute when we implemented our drainage ordinance. I'd probably let Wade review that a little more.
Wade, do you have any information for us?
Yeah, I can just tell you. Basically the question was put to me whether or not ag properties are need to be exempted because of state statute. What the drainage, the stormwater drainage utility, when we set it up, we used it's basically a newer version of the statute. There used to be an older statute that was like a street assessment. You could do a general street assessment for the whole city for all your streets, just to put it into your street budget. And it was sort of on top and separate from any other tax levy. So this is sort of an updated version of that. It's a general, it's called a special maintenance fee. And so it's not limited to, you can assess it in a couple of different ways. One way is according to drainage basins. We have the city divided up into various drainage basins, and you can apportion it. You know, one basin needs more upgrades than another, or more structures are needed in this one, more improvements have been made in this one. So you can apportion it that way, or you can do it another way, and we did it a different way depending on the use of the property. So my basic conclusion is that ag properties don't have to be exempted from our stormwater utility drainage fee the way we've set it up.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion at this time? The motion on the floor is to acknowledge this discussion and to place on the next Public Works agenda the discussion of the rate schedule for the drainage utility fee. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 18. Item number 18 is the appeal of denial of the request for an exception from James Huff to allow no emergency overflow tank for property owners on Calabaja Street with pressure sewer systems. Chair recognizes Alderwoman Doyle.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if we could have a 5-minute recess to look over what was placed on the dais just before the meeting, as well as, I don't know if staff has had an opportunity to look at this. You have? We haven't. Would you mind taking a 5-minute recess?
Do I have any objections from the committee members? Seeing no objection, we're in recess for about 5 to 10 minutes. Just a notification, we'll be beginning in about a minute. Recess is ending for the Public Works meeting dated July 29th, 2014. We are on item number 18. It is the appeal of denial of a request for an exception from James Huff to allow no emergency overflow tank for property owners on Calabaha Street with pressure sewer systems. Chair had recognized Alderwoman Doyle. Alderwoman Doyle, you still have the floor. Alderwoman Doyle yields. I have no motion, and is there any committee member that would like to speak on this item? Chair recognizes Alderman Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I have a question for either Dale or Terry, whoever wants to answer it. When you did research on these new lift stations, did you notice in, I don't know, in their whatever, whether or not you could actually put a reserve tank on, adapt one to it?
Yeah, the intent, thank you, Madam Chair. The intent is not to have an auxiliary reservoir for this actual pump system. Just as Mr. Huff stated in his letter here, when the capacity, or if the pump quits on the lift station, it's going to back up into the house. Our requirement is to have something that's going to catch that back up into the house. It's not to supplement that pump system. So the purpose for the 500-gallon is strictly for an overflow. It's not to provide additional capacity for the pump of the lift station. Does that make any sense?
Well, it does, except for how would you put the overflow on the line that's going from the house into the station? I mean, that's exactly what you said there.
Correct. Somewhere between the house and the pump station, you're going to have this overflow tank. So when sewage no longer goes down the pipe that goes into the lift station, it's going to back up into the tank rather than into the house. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would kind of like to see how you were going to do it, but it does make sense. My question being, why would you, if they want to put generators in to keep their property running all the time, why would staff even fight it? I mean, if they have the generators, there's no way, unless they have a generator problem, that they're ever not going to have power to that station.
If I could provide a little background information. Actually, our criteria calls for, when you have a lift station, a private lift station, you have to have a duplex pumping system. You have to have 2 pumps. Our original discussion with the property owners was that you need to meet this requirement as well. We had a meeting with the individuals, and they asked us to reconsider, to look at the data. We did that, and we said, you know what, in lieu of putting in a system with 2 pumps, we'll allow you to do 1 pump, but the storage is important. You can have all the electrical backup in the world, but if you have a pump that goes out, the electrical backup doesn't do you any good. If the pump fails, you need somewhere for that sewage to go, thus our reasoning for the 500-gallon storage, which is part of our criteria anyway.
And the 500-gallon storage would be on each line going into there.
That's correct.
Thank you. Could I ask Mr. Huff for, you had your hand up if you want.
I'd like my neighbors to also comment on this. The system has never been tested. It's never been proven. There's no other system like that in Rapid City. The manufacturers said, we don't know how to do it. So while this theoretically sounds very good, pragmatically, it's never been tested. And we don't want to be the test animals for this type of system, especially since we're proximal to Canyon Lake. As far as the pumps are concerned, we had one pump. What we have now, when you read this, you read the issue. We've had one pump for 40-some years serving 3 residences from 1 lift station. And then suddenly we were going to be required to have 6 pumps, 2 pumps for each residence. That second pump would most probably rust out before the first one wore out because it wouldn't be used. So to me, this is an example of overkill at its worst. So when we did talk, and you came back, and I thank you for agreeing with that very much, that we do not need 2 pumps for every residence. The company that services these pumps have pumps available to replace anytime one would go out 24/7. That's farmers. They have the experience base. They're the first ones we went to. So that argument for 2 pumps went out the window. The second argument about having a 500-gallon holding tank also should go out the window. What we should be looking at is maintaining the integrity of the system to get the sewer off the property and into the main city sewer line. And that would be done with auxiliary power. What you would have with this system is a 500-gallon tank that, in the worst case scenario, I can't come up with a scenario where this would happen. It's difficult for me to get my mind around how would you have a situation like that. Now, also in this point that what homes generate on average per household, 2.6, which is in a handout, between 100 and 200 gallons of wastewater a day. So these these 500-gallon tanks would accommodate you for 2 days. Well, my concern is when we had the blizzard on October 4th, we were without power for 6 days. We just simply shut down conserving water. Conserving the water, we had no problem. So I really cannot see putting in a 500-gallon tank that would compromise the hermetically sealed system for getting the wastewater off the property. And neither do the manufacturers. I also have another concern, and my neighbors also commented on this. Tampering with this system, my question would be, would that compromise the warranty of the pump and the system itself? And no one has an answer for that.
Thank you, Mr. Huff. Is that a question that you've asked to the manufacturer of this pump?
Yes, our engineers, yeah. Well, we haven't asked if it would compromise the warranty because they've never seen it done.
Well, I imagine if they haven't seen it done, it probably would compromise the warranty. You know, that would just be my guess from my experience of different things like this. You know, with all of the lift pumps that we have where I work, there has never been a problem of one going down and us not being able to get a pump locally and get it installed and get it in within a matter of hours if we didn't have one, you know, in stock. But I can't imagine you guys would be willing to take the liability of if it did back up, it's going to back up into your residence. So I'm guessing you have a pretty good feeling that this system is going to work, and with backup power, you can keep this system going. And I really don't like the idea of putting this overflow on this system that you've described, because I'm kind of worried about the way that it may or may not work, and then also the cost to you. I mean, this has got to be a pretty big cost of putting that tank in. And we start going down this road, and I see where we could end up doing this to a lot of our residents. Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair would like to recognize Mr. Dale Tech for some clarification. Also, Dale, from an earlier conversation, just to clear up the point before Alderman Roberts started this, if this 500-gallon tank was put in as the overflow system, that would not have a way to be pumped out to the station, would it? It would have to be actually pumped out by a mobile truck?
Can I draw you a picture?
Absolutely. You can try. Or I should say, you can draw a picture and I will try to understand.
That's a house, I think. This rectangle that I just drew the X through is the E1 ejector system, which is the sealed pumping system that Mr. Huff has referred to in his correspondence. Obviously, the diagonal line going from the house to the E1 system would be the sewer pipe that connects the two. I actually don't have this drawn to scale, obviously, and the line that goes into the E1 system actually is in the bottom half of the system. So the system stands alone. It has a discharge pipe that discharges out to a public main up the road. That's the ultimate goal of the system. If the pump were to fail in the E1 system, or the power were to go out and there was no possible way to provide electrical power, the sewage is going to back up this diagonal line to the house. If a storage tank of a 500-gallon capacity was put here, with a separate line coming off the inlet line above the invert of it, all the flows from the house would go to the E1 system until the E1 system was fully backed up, and then it'll start backing up the diagonal line and then flow into this 500-gallon tank. So this 500-gallon tank is completely independent of the E1 system. Won't affect the warranty, won't affect the way it operates. It has nothing to do with it. As long as the E1 sees sewage in it or water in it, it'll pump. Back to your question, Madam Chair, about what do you do if the tank backs up? Well, there's two things you could do. As I said, I didn't have this drawn quite to scale. Actually, this line goes more like this. A person could install a drain in the bottom of the tank that connects back to the pipe going to the E1 system with a valve on it that could be operated to open that tank up, let it gravity back to the E1 when the E1 is operational. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is just to have it plumbed with the overflow going into it, and when it's full, have a pumper trunk come and pump it out. So those are your two options. I think any good consulting engineer can certainly come up with 3 or 4 other options to manage that as well. I hope that helps. Do you have any questions?
That helps me. I do have another council member up here. Chair recognizes Alderman Estes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Dale, I have a question. On the discharge side of that ejector pump.
This is discharge side, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Right outside. Would there? I assume the system would have a check valve. So
Actually, it has a dual check valve.
So we're not worried about that pressure line. If a power failure, we're not worried about that stuff just coming all the way back to the house.
With the dual check valves, we hope it doesn't happen. Can it happen? Certainly. Any mechanical device can fail. In fact, we've seen it before in the city. As I understand, there was a case up, I think it was on Floorman, Upper Floorman, where they have lift station, where that's exactly what happened. The neighbor's sewage were forced back into the neighbor's home. They came home from vacation and had a substantial amount of sewage in their basement.
So then for the tank to work, then they would have to continue. How much storage is in that ejector? So their drain pipe between the house, their sewer line from the house to the ejector is not full all the time. It's clean, it runs. So that ejector must have some amount of storage.
70 gallons.
Okay, all right. So then for that tank to become in play, power's out, check valves are in place. They've filled the ejector cavity full of 70 gallons, plus now it's starting to run up the, okay, so then it starts to go into the tank. So my question is how do you, I'm trying to envision, how do you pipe something, how do you keep that stuff from going into the tank on its way to the ejector pump when everything's working hunky-dory?
What I would imagine you could do, and there's probably a number of ways to do it, is to put a Y in the line here, so your normal flows are going down this leg of the Y, and then once it starts backing up, it'll back up into the upper Y and then dump into the tank. I'm not a very good illustrationist, if you will, but yeah, you would certainly have to plumb it so your everyday flows do not go in the tank. Just when you have a backup situation where the capacity of the normal discharge line is completely full, and then it'll back up into the tank.
So I guess I have a question I would have for the homeowners. I guess if you had a power outage and not, unless you were relying on the generator to provide some service to your home while you had a power outage, I mean, this looks to like a lesser expensive way to do it, and it works passively. I mean, as long as somebody can plumb it, and I guess I see from the injector pump side of it, we're not conducting an experiment with these people's pump system. Do the homeowners have a local consulting engineer that they're working with on this?
Yeah, Dana Foreman from KLJ Engineering is working with the property owners.
Sorry, I did. Thank you. Well, I'm having a tough time with this, but I'm going to yield the floor and think about this a little bit. Thanks.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Alderman Roberts.
Didn't realize I'd went back into the queue. Thank you, Madam Chair. Brad answered quite a few of my questions. One of the things that I figured that you probably would recommend in that line too, Dale, would be another check valve to keep it from backing up, because putting a Y in it, you're still going to get some backup coming into the other line. And one thing that concerned me about putting a check valve in that part of that line was the fact of failure. It's eventually, you're not going to dig that line up. That line's going to be there for a long time, and you're going to end up having failure. Another question would be on this backup system. What would be the city, how would the city inspect this to make sure that it's not leaking, to make sure, do we have something in the code right now to make sure if we did something like this, we had some way to keep an eye on it so we don't have another septic problem?
This would fall under our standard service line inspection. So when this system is installed, any work on the service line to the public main will be inspected by our utility maintenance crews, so they'll inspect the entire system. Just for clarification, there will not be a check valve between the house and the ejector. There's a check valve located right on the outlet of the ejector and then one right in the force main part of it. So you've got no check valves in this area here.
So
just for clarification.
So like if Mr. Huff said, with this, and the power went out during the snowstorm for 6 days and they were still using it, once that tank filled up, it would still back into their house.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I see no other committee member lights up here. The chair would like to consider or would take under consideration a motion at this time from any of the committee members present. Chair recognizes Alderman Roberts.
I will make a motion to take this to council without recommendation. I'd like a little more time to think about it and look into some of the engineering on this.
Got a motion by Roberts to send to council without recommendation. Do I have a second? Got a second by Estes. Chair recognizes Alderwoman Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if I may direct a question to any of the homeowners as far as if you've looked at the cost differential for what the city's proposing versus what your engineer is proposing. Yes, sir.
Looks like Mr. Helland is going to try to field this question.
I think it came in about $4,000 additional for each home. Now, you have to realize this is not the only cost we're incurring. We're putting in 1,100 feet of new pipe. We're putting in new grinder systems at each home. I mean, we don't even know what the total cost is that this is going to be, but I'm worried it's going to be 6 figures split between 3 homeowners already, let alone with this additional cost. So it isn't like the only thing we're worried about is that overflow tank. Plus, I brought up before, if the electricity goes out, you know, we can't run we can't wash our clothes, we can't run our dishwasher. In reality, probably not going to take a shower because your hot water heater isn't working. So I don't know how we're going to create these hundreds of gallons of water into our system. It's going to be a problem. And we've gotten pretty efficient at water saving techniques already. I mean, it's we don't even want to tell you what we do at home to not use much water. So it's so I mean that's our concern. It's a tremendous cost to each homeowner. And I really think the system set up properly is going to work and not be a problem. We don't want to. Last thing we want is sewage to end up in the lake. I'm a little concerned why you're worried if sewage ends up on my basement. I guess that's my concern, I would think, than the city's concern. I mean, that's that's us. We're going to take that responsibility and clean up. So.
But I'm wondering, Mr. Helland, is KLJ is a terrific firm, and I'm wondering if your spokes engineer wouldn't mind coming to council Monday night to.
We'd have to ask Dana. I don't know. He's got obviously a lot of projects. He's got a lot of things going on all the time. But Jim, would you have any idea there or not? Would Dana be available Monday? Do you have any idea or not?
I don't have any idea. He's out of town right now.
I think he's in Winter, South Dakota today, or no, he's in Pine Ridge, I think, today, and but we could sure ask him. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
And that's my request. If you're comfortable asking him, I think it would help us. It'd help me to have a different perspective from the experts now, so that we can kind of compare and contrast what's going on here. Because I think, you know, obviously we have a set of beliefs on both sides, and I don't know that one of them is wrong. It's just a matter of looking at this and who's going to put their stamp on it. So I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. All right. You're welcome.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Alderman Estes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tom, if you, I got one more question. Or, yeah, the other Tom, the nice Tom.
Mr.
Yes, yes.
Did you say you got a bid for $4,000 to bury a 500 gallon?
That's what Dana thought the total cost would be between the tank and the installation, whatever. He said it'd be about $3,000 to $4,000. What he told us. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, we're just talking about the tank.
About the tank.
Yeah.
Is this a poly or a concrete tank, Mr. Tech? I'm sorry. Madam Chair, I'm asking.
It would be a concrete tank, I would expect.
Okay.
Certainly
All right.
a poly tank would be acceptable as well.
All right, thank you.
Chair sees no other committee members' lights. If there's no further discussion, I do have a motion on the floor to send to council without recommendation. That means this will go to council Monday night for final decision. The decision Monday night could be a continuation if committee members at that time need more time, or you may have a decision reached by the city council Monday night. With that being said, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Item number 19 is a solid waste division report by Mr. Carl Murbach. Welcome, Carl.
Thank you very much. We'll wait for our presentation to come up. We'll try and make this brief for everyone. Just wanted to update you on some of our current and some of our future projects that we do have coming up. A couple of the projects that we've gone through in 2004, every April we hold our Rapid City Cleanup Week. This year we held our 44th annual, so we've been doing this a long time. Just a couple of brief statistics on that. Over 2,000 free pickup and carloads were received. 55 community dumpsters, besides the ones that we have in town. There are places like Box Elder and that put out community dumpsters for their cleanup. One of the other projects that we do is we do have volunteers that go around and clean up public right-of-ways, railroad right-of-ways. We had 147 areas cleaned by 48 volunteer organizations, individuals, families, and businesses. And while this is free for most folks, it is not free to the city. Between the cost of disposal, overtime, all of the other things, that ran just short of $60,000. So that is just gives you a little idea of what that costs us each year. I think it's a good thing for the community. I think it makes a lot of difference, but it is not free. Just a couple of pictures, even with the new Citizen Campus, things went very, very smoothly. Weather has a lot to do with being able to, how much traffic we get, and just a nice thing of, you can just see the age difference in some of the volunteers out there. We have opened our new Citizen Campus. One of the major things there was the relocation of the Fairmont drop-off site to the new secured facilities over at the landfill. Now that people have somewhat gotten used to what it is, we've had a lot of good positive comments about that. The Fairmont site will go through tearing that old site out because it is settling, turn that back into park. That is a project we're looking at this winter. Our new education center is up and running, again with a late spring start here. We do have our gardens, the new scale house, our small load drop-off area. And like any other project, we still have a few minor punch list items that we're still going through. Some pictures there of the 24-hour drop-off. Again, a lot of positive comments. The one negative comment we get is, why do I have to throw it up and over into a dumpster? Well, you had to throw it up and over to get it into your pickup truck or other things. Some of the bigger, larger, heavier loads we still do send up to the landfill. We did hold our household hazardous waste collection day. Of course, that was initially scheduled for October 5th. For some reason, we did have to cancel that last year. But just a few statistics, we did accept over 40,000 pounds of materials, a lot of waste paint, hazardous chemicals, up to 34 pounds of mercury-containing compounds that were accepted. Because this was our first time, we anticipated that cost to be anywhere from $25,000 to $40,000. The actual was up at $50,000 for the cost of that event. A couple of things that came out of this, and we are looking right now to install some waste oil facilities. We did see a lot of waste oil coming in. It's not really considered a household hazardous waste, but there really is a demand out there for this type of service, and it is something that we could set up that would not take a lot of effort. As far as the questions regarding another planned event, we think the fall is actually a better time for that, and so we will look in 2015 to plan another event. Just some of the pictures from that, very well organized, and again, we wanted to thank we already publicly recognized the Central States Fair for the use of their facilities during that. Overall, it worked out very, very well. I think we had 725 vehicles come in that day alone. We also did finish up recently our tire amnesty program in 2012. We received a $100,000 grant to accept waste tires from residents around the area. Because of the construction at the Citizen campus, we were delayed a little bit. So on April 4th and 5th, we did hold a final tire amnesty day. Finished up that grant. We were a little short of the final spending that entire amount. That amount went back to the state, but again, that money is still available for future events. You can just see some of the tires that were collected. These were ground and hauled to another landfill that could accept this type of waste, because we cannot bury tires in our landfill. We are not permitted for that. One of the things that we are just finishing right now is our new Cell 16. If you saw the mayor's update, maybe just a few pictures in there. This is a $2.5 million construction project to set up our next cell for acceptance of garbage. We were delayed because of the storms last fall, and we are looking to begin this soon. We have met substantial completion. Still waiting final approval from DENR to make sure everything is good enough to then start taking garbage into there. It's quite an impressive site for a hole in the ground. And this is the first time that we have used a synthetic liner, a plastic liner, covered by a geosynthetic liner, which is a impregnated clay liner. 2 feet of fill goes over the top of that. So it's a lot of money to place garbage in there, but we think we're well protected with the environmental factors that have to go along with that. Just real quick, some of our remaining 2014 and future projects. Just about a minute here, we are opening bids on our landfill cell 13 and 14 closure. When we finish a cell, we have to cap that. We're looking at a 2-foot clay layer cap, compacted clay layer cap on there. And again, bids are opening at 2 o'clock this afternoon. The same thing with our next phase of our landfill gas collection. We are getting into our cell 12, which was closed about 3 years ago. We will be installing gas wells into there. The other thing that we are working on right now is working to permit what we call the Johnson property. Back in 2003, we purchased an additional 106 acres to the south of us. We had 10 years that we had to just let that set, but now is the time to get in and work to permit that area while we can, to get that set for future landfill use. Again, with our existing properties, we're looking at capacities out to 2060. A couple of other things, we are looking at some future expansion of our recycling programs. We're looking to scale back a little bit on our making the compost out of our regular household garbage, but then we need to take a look at future cardboard, curbside, newspaper, other things that currently aren't accepted curbside in town. We are also looking in the future to expand to some of the areas that we currently do not collect. We get a lot of demands from commercial businesses in town of how they can participate, because our private haulers aren't necessarily offering those type of services. We want to take a look at that. We have funding sources. We have different ways that we can add that to our utility bill. And then in also the future to expand out, since we are a regional landfill facility, to expand recycling outside of the city limits. Last on our list is, let's face it, the Rapid City is growing, not all in the places we'd like to, especially on the east side, the Elks Club, up to the north side off of Homestead. And we are getting a lot of folks up in the Carriage Hills, places that we haven't served before. So since 2012, we had added 675 new accounts to our garbage pickup. Doesn't always fit that system, so we are looking to reschedule, restructure some of our routes. Best time to do that is usually around the first of the year. There's a lot of education, a lot of things that we need to make sure we get out to the public, but those are just a few of the things that we have going on. With that in mind, if you have any questions, otherwise, stop out and visit if you haven't been out to the landfill in a while.
Thank you, Carl. Since you're planning your next hazardous waste tentatively for the fall of 2013, is that your estimation of our next snowstorm? I'm kidding. Chair recognizes Alderman Estes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Carl, thanks for the report. Question that this new cell 16, like what's the life expectancy? How long before that we'd have that filled up?
Well, that is about anywhere from 4 to 5 years. The actual next cell is scheduled right next to that. As we fill the one cell, we'll be borrowing dirt from another. That's usually the way the landfill will work, is we borrow from one area, fill that area, and then approximately 5 to 6 years from now, we'll be constructing that next cell right next to that.
So
but again, this is all phased in our work here.
So is each day's worth of garbage or whatever you receive, is it topped with a certain amount of dirt each night?
We have by permit, we can use a spray-on cover. Once a week we have to cover with 6 inches of dirt, which mainly creates a fire layer. So if we do have a fire, that gives some barrier in there for that. We do use if you're familiar with like a hydro seed, it's that type of compound, so we can keep vectors, animals, birds, and things like that out of that. Every foot of air, we call it airspace, every foot of that is worth money. There's millions of dollars just in a couple feet of landfill space in there, so it's up to us to make sure we use that wisely.
Okay, thank you. And then you mentioned tires, and just as what makes a landfill able to take tires and one not?
One of the things that they have to, we just can't bury whole tires. They're going to have to be ground, chipped. We'd like to find some beneficial reuse for that. Unfortunately, many of the manufacturers that will take those tires, chip those up, make a rubber type mulch for that are just too far away to haul tires from Rapid City, the eastern side of the state. They can go to Minneapolis. They have sources like that, but again, we're still looking at alternatives for that.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you, Carl. Another question, when you presented this, you talked about taking in some waste oil, and that typically the landfill does not currently take in waste oil?
We are a solid waste facility. It's just a convenient location to set up. And again, we have to make sure we meet all the environmental factors with that. But again, waste oil is a product that can be reused and recycled. So if we have a convenient area for people to bring that in, there are places such as Walmart's or some of the auto parts store that will accept small amounts, but there's still a number of people out there that still like to work on their own vehicles to do that. It wouldn't be a large capital investment, but we think it would be a great thing for the community because, again, during our household hazardous waste, we actually had to cut off oil because we had collected almost 2,000 gallons of just waste oil.
And I know that there are a few industrial sites within the city and outside the city that actually have installed some waste oil equipment, such as heaters to heat up small buildings and that type of stuff. That's a way that they're recycling and using their own. So this may potentially give you an outlet to be able to actually be able to recycle and reuse or repurpose that waste oil too, if you had a way of collecting it.
Right, and it does not cost us anything to dispose of that. We'll have companies that will come in and do that. There even is the potential, depending on the demand, of getting paid a small amount for that used oil.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your presentation, Carl. I'm not seeing any other lights. I've got a motion by Doyle to acknowledge the report. Second by Estes. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn by Doyle. Second by Estes. All in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.